Hi, I'm Caroline Hayes and I am the Head of History at Uffculme. I think history is a really important subject because it kind of helps us to understand where we are and why we're here. There's always those sort of people who say, well, you need to know about your past to learn about your future, and that is important. But it's helping inspire passion. It's helping us to understand, if you look at all these other subjects as well, it's all come from development. It's all come from people in the past doing things, challenging themselves, trying things out, getting things right, getting things wrong. And through that, we develop to where we are. And in every area, we look at science, we look at politics. And I think it's a really fascinating thing to see how humans have developed, how culture has developed, and to help children to understand how that plays into their role in society today and how that will help them as they move forward and develop our sort of society and our cultures as we move forward into the future as well. So in year 7, when they come up, we teach history chronologically. We will be looking at teaching them some initial skills because it's never taught as an explicit subject in primary school. So we start off by teaching some of the skills they'll need to be able to access the subject and study it well. We then start to look at the sort of 1066 onwards period. So what is considered the start of English history in that respect. So we begin with the Norman Conquest and William the Conqueror, moving on to look at some of the challenges that are faced by medieval monarchs. We then in the second term start to look at the Tudor period. So we look at Henry VIII and Elizabeth and the impact they have. We stay in that sort of period as we move into the summer term and we look at Elizabethan exploration, giving a more global sort of understanding of where Britain was at that time and how it sort of impacted on the rest of the world, before looking at a case study of the native North Americans in the end of year 7. Moving into year 8, we start with the Civil War, looking at how that impacted England and society. We then sort of replicate that by looking at how that developed over in France with the French Revolution, before moving into the Industrial Revolution, where they get an understanding of the industrial culture and how that really started to develop the society we're looking at today. In year 9, we pick up with modern history, looking at World War I, World War II, what led to those, what the consequences of them were, before moving in to look at a case study on Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. So in our GCSE history course, we have 4 units that we look at, and we've tried to keep them as diverse as possible to engage as many students as possible. So we look at a depth study on Germany, looking at Germany from the end of World War I, the impact of that, how that led to the rise of extremist parties like the Nazis, and then looking at how Hitler was able to develop that into a totalitarian state. We then go on to look at our study through time, which is crime and punishment. And this is looking at the strands of crimes, punishments, and policing and law enforcement. And we take that from the start of the Saxon period right up until the modern day, looking at each of those strands in turn. There's also a depth study on Whitechapel, where we focus on that area during the sort of end of the 19th century and the problems of policing it and why that led to high levels of crime. We then move them on to look at 2 sort of more detailed studies where we look at Elizabethan England, looking at the first part of Elizabeth's reign and how she sort of faced the challenge that she had when she came to the throne and how she established herself, looking as well at a sort of societal view of her reign, just not the Queen herself. And then we look at finally the American West, which is the sort of cowboys and Indians sort of approach to it. But more than that, looking at the impact that we had on the people who lived there first, looking at how people were able to migrate and settle across the plains, and looking at the impact of that on things like law and order, and what encouraged them with things like the gold rush and the cattle industry and things like that. History has been a popular subject at Key Stage 3, and it's certainly growing in popularity at Key Stage 4, and I think that's in large part due to the nature of what we study and the diversity of the topics that we're looking at. It's much more inclusive than perhaps the old sort of political history had been. We've always sort of had very positive lessons. Kids are very enthused and very engaged at Key Stage 3. They like a lot of the topics, and they're interested in them, and I think the passion with which the staff teach also helps inspire that. So we have 4 history teachers in the history department, all of whom are very passionate about the subject, all of whom know their subject in great depth and do a lot to encourage students to explore further beyond just what we teach in the classroom. We're also very lucky in that we have one of the newest buildings in the school. It's a fantastic building, very, very nice presentation, and great facilities that make our teaching very easy. In terms of our teaching, a lot of it is classroom-based, but we do try and bring it to life as much as possible. So, for example, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be taking our Year 7s down onto the field and reenacting the Battle of Hastings. We also like to get them out and sort of try and get them to sort of think around the subject so that they're able to explore the kind of movement of history and the reality of history, not just sort of sit in the classroom getting it from sort of textbooks and from us. We also try and include a lot of trips as well. We like extracurricular. Bringing history to life is really important, and we are really lucky in this country that there are many opportunities for children to actually go out and touch history quite literally. So in Year 7, we sort of explore it more in and around the school. Year 8, we have 2 trips that we do. We get them out to Morwellham Quay during our study of the industrial period, but we also are very lucky to have a living history group come in who look at the Civil War, and they do reenactments, and they're able to try on the outfits, they're able to look at some of the weaponry and instruments that we used in this period, and we even have sort of pike drill and musket firing up on the top field if we're lucky. In Year 11, we also have a very popular residential where we, as part of our Crime and Punishment, take the students to London and try and immerse them in that sort of area of history with sort of trips including the London dungeons, the Tower of London, the Clink prison, as well as other things as well. So it's something that we're trying to explore. We do have a number of sort of projects that students can do. We have competitions throughout the year that they can take part in. We have our castle building competition in Year 7. We have our historical egg character competition around the Easter term, and we're certainly always looking for ways to develop it. At the moment, we're trying to develop a historical reading club to try and get students to kind of embrace both their sort of English and their history. And we've always found that if children can engage with sort of historical fiction, it often inspires them to want to know more about the reality of those periods. So it's something we'd like to push further.